Yeah. Uh-huh. See, yeah, the trailer for me, it looked like the same kind of action that there was in Wonder Woman, and it was muddy and just like fiery all over the place, and just didn't. Yeah, it had the same, and for whatever this is worth, I guess maybe it's kind of a good thing. Like, at least the aesthetic in the DCEU is consistent in that it's, muddy and fiery and looks like crap, but at least it all does. Yeah. Yeah. Right, and see, but that's the thing. Like, if it was something, if it was a visualization of Aquaman that was anywhere close to how he's been portrayed in the comics ever, then maybe you would recognize him, maybe. But Aquaman is such a C level character, C list character in the first place. Right. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, this is whatever else you have to say about Thor: The Dark World. If you don't love it, then at the very least, like, what we get in the Dark World is the very first hint that we are actually gonna get an Infinity Gauntlet um, adaptation, because for the collector to actually say Infinity Stones there at the end, you're like, oh yes, about to get real. Well, see, at the end of Avengers, you knew Thanos. Okay, so Infinity Gauntlet is definitely his biggest thing, but the Tesseract, the Tesseract is what the MCU is calling an artifact from Marvel Comics in general that was called the Cosmic Cube, and that was something that Thanos was after for a while. That was Thanos' first big thing in the comics, was getting the Cosmic Cube. And in the comics, that artifact has the properties of, like, basically reshaping reality. Um, and the Red Skull was after it for a long time too. It's a really significant artifact in Marvel Comics lore, and when that showed up, first in Captain America, it would have been definitely a thing that Thanos could have been after as well, given that Loki was sort of using it there. But then again, it doesn't really make sense, because if he was after it, he would have already had it basically at that point, and so on and so forth. Right. Yeah. 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 Possibly. But I think at that point, by that time, the movies had so much momentum already, and there was so much good buzz about Avengers. I don't know that anybody was really planning for a catastrophic failure. Maybe. Well, actually, I can refute that. I can refute that because Thanos was a late addition to Avengers. Yeah, that was a late thing that Joss Whedon like kind of tacked on close to the end of the production. Yep. Hmm. Right. For him to go, as Darcy so craftily put it, banana balls. Which I had totally forgotten that, but it made me laugh even more because of what I told you a few months ago that I sort of came up with on the top of my head was the crazy balls thing. It's like, oh, someone's already basically done that, but that's still funny. Right. Yeah. Right. Messed with his brain a little bit. Yep. Yeah. Right. Not no, no. The ether is not part of the comics story of the Dark Elves and Malekith at all. And the ether pretty much exists just as a MacGuffin in this story, and it will play in later as an Infinity Stone, the Infinity Stone of reality. If for anyone who's keeping track of the Infinity Stones and which one is what and where they are. Yeah, what's kind of funny to me is how each of the and this is one thing that I wish they would have done a little bit better. As these Infinity Stones are all being introduced, it's unfortunate in my mind that pretty much they all are just being used as weapons of some kind, just very generic offensive weapons. Um, the Tesseract to a lesser extent, but it was harnessed as a weapon primarily, and I was getting there. Yeah. But the Tesseract was used primarily as something to create offensive weapons from. The Ether obviously was used just as a weapon, and so was the Power Stone from Guardians of the Galaxy. And we'll get to that later on when I have that discussion. But yeah, the Time Stone in the Amulet of Agamotto is definitely the exception to that rule so far. But even the Mind Stone from that was in Loki's scepter, like yeah, he did use that to like control minds, but then like it was definitely also used as an offensive weapon. Even when Vision acquired it in Age of Ultron, like it had some sort of weaponized capability, which is very strange, especially when being used against robot drones. Um, Now that use is consistent with the power that Vision has in the comics, but it's just weird that it would be fueled by the Mind Stone. So anyway, that that's just my little gripe about the Infinity Stone. So anyway, in answer to your actual question, the ether. That is cool. Yes, that is. I do like that a lot, and it's interesting. Like it was a cool. It's been good misdirects that you don't actually see them as the Infinity Stones until the end of the Dark World. Like you don't know that the Tesseract is the mind or is the Space Stone, or that the gem in Loki's scepter is the Mind Stone. Um, and yeah, like until later in Age of Ultron. Yeah, it's definitely interesting the way they've done that. I do like that part about it a lot. Right. Yeah. The cursed as like a group don't exist as much, but there is a character named Curse with a K, who was originally named Algrim, and he was a dark elf, who was allied with Malekith, and he was just basically he was empowered by Malekith to go after Thor, essentially, and his yeah, that character is from the comics. Like his power set and so on is a good bit different um, in the comics than it is in the movie. He doesn't have this sort of like whatever like life force draining kind of power that you see him exhibit that just leaves like dried out husks in his wake. Um, but he was basically just really really strong, and the armor that he was fused with is kind of a sentient thing and sort of gives him awareness of all of his surroundings. Basically he can see 360 degrees through the sensory perception of the armor. Yeah. A little bit. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, a little bit. I can see that. I can see that. Yeah, but there are definitely some really fun Easter eggs in the Dark World that you wouldn't necessarily um, pick up on if you weren't versed in the lore of the comics. At the beginning, when they're all fighting on Vanaheim, the big rock creature that comes up that Thor like dispatches with one mighty blow is the same kind of thing that he actually there were two of them that he fought in the very first his very first appearance in the comics in Journey into Mystery. Um, they were sort of like the vanguard of alien invaders, and he fought them off when he found the hammer and well, yeah, basically. And yeah, so that was kind of fun. And something that I noticed this time around that I don't know if I really realized um, on my first viewing, but when they're at that like abandoned kind of warehouse place and they're playing around with all the different like gravitational like anomalies that are there, there's basically a Stonehenge built out of shipping containers. Yeah. Yeah, somebody had built a Stonehenge out of shipping containers, which is interesting because when